Well, good morning, everyone. How are you today? Just give me a big thumbs up if you can hear me and let me know where you're listening from. I'm Sue Pelland and I love applique quilts. And today we are going to play with some applique. We are truly playing today because just about an hour ago, I said I really want to add to my series of critters. And so we're going to play with critters today. And I am inspired by the ocean today. You may have read my newsletter last week. If you're not on my newsletter list, go ahead to SuePellandDesigns.com and click to get a free pattern on the right hand side. That's going to give you a free pattern for our mini mug rug, our little pin quilt. I'm grabbing the samples here. So we're going to either make some coasters or a mini mug rug or a pin quilt, and that free pattern will also get you onto our email list. And if you don't want to join the email list, simply click unsubscribe once you get there. But what I wanted to share with you was that in my newsletter last week, I talked about my happy place. And I just want to reiterate what I said about my happy place. Let me turn on a light here, because so many of you commented on that happy place email that I sent out. And so I just want to talk about that for a minute because I have been doing some personal development. I'm really working on having a positive attitude and thinking positively. I've been working with the author of this book, Train Your Brain, Dana Wilde, and she has a club for positive mindset. So I've been working with Dana a little bit and trying to improve my positive outlook on life. And one of those things that I remember from way back when I was in a very stressful corporate job in the textile industry, and my boss having several young women under his, he was overseeing several young women in the textile industry at a time when it was very, very unusual to have women in the textile industry. So he suggested that all of us young women get together, and it wasn't only young women, it was all the women in the office, get together and go to this conference for women in business. And the whole point of that conference was how to remove stress, how to deal with stress in your job and in your life. And one of the things that one of the presenters said during that 2-day seminar was that whenever she needs a little stress relief, she goes to her happy place. So in my newsletter last week, I said to you, where is your happy place? Is it sitting at your sewing machine? You know, that is my happy place, but it's also part of my business. So I don't tend to de-stress by sitting at my sewing machine. My favorite place to de-stress is to get out of the house so that there's nothing hanging over my head that needs to be done, no UFOs that are calling to me, no rooms that need painting, no laundry to do or dishes to clean. So my happy place is getting out to the ocean or to the beach. So I just want to tell you a little bit about that talk that she gave us about finding your happy place. But before I do, let's check in with Debbie West, Kathy from Ohio. Good morning. I see several other people. Oh, Mary Estes, Pop. Mary Pop, welcome. And if you are not signed up with StreamYard to give me your name on your comments, I see several Facebook users. Oh, that's Cindy Brown. Good. Somebody else said good morning or morning, and I didn't catch who that was. So Debbie West says, good morning from Cape Cod. My happy place is the beach as well, especially when I'm in my kayak. Oh, Debbie, that sounds like a little slice of heaven. When I recovered from a car accident several years ago, I used to have an image of sitting at Herring Cove Beach with my feet in the sand and watching the sunset. While vacationing here, you plan your day around sunset at Herring Cove. It still is Debbie's way to de-stress. Well, Debbie, I'm hoping to get down there to see you someday and see that beautiful place in person. I've never been to Herring Cove on Cape Cod, but it seems like a dream to me to be able to go there. Becky Koopman, welcome. So this morning, I decided I was going to take out my little snapshot of my happy place and play with some of those happy fabrics. So my happy place is definitely going to the ocean. But I realize many of you don't have access to the ocean. Is your happy place going to the lake? Do you have a lake house? Do you love to just sit by a river and watch the water flow? To me, it's all about water. That's what makes me calm. That's what soothes my soul. So whether it's at the ocean or at a lake or hiking by a river or going to see a waterfall, those are all of my happy places. But my very favorite happy place is South Shore Beach in Little Compton. And this little quilt right here, let me get my chair out of the way. But this little quilt right here is a little beach scene that I did several years ago. And that's the little postcard. That's the little tiny picture that I have in my mind, is sitting at the beach with my toes in the sand. So I would love for you to shrink that picture down, whether it's the lake with the water lilies and the sun glistening off the surface of the lake, or it's sitting at the ocean listening to those seagulls overhead, listening to the sound of those lapping waves. No matter where your happy place is, I think it would be fabulous to be able to make a quilt out of it, and then take that picture of that quilt, or take that picture in your mind's eye and shrink it down to a little tiny postage stamp. That little tiny postage stamp you're going to put in your memory. You're going to have that in a place in your memory that you can access all the time. I did this 30 years ago when I was in that stress relief workshop for women in business. And I have that exact same picture, an Adirondack chair on the ocean, toes in the sand, my happy place watching that sunset, maybe a little glass of vino in my hand. And that is on my little tiny postage stamp picture. And whenever I need to de-stress, I can go back to that tiny little postage stamp and blow it up so it surrounds me. And in that is the detail of the sound of that ocean, the sound of those waves lapping, the sound of those seagulls calling. I can picture the little sandpipers running back and into the surf and back to find their little treasures from the sea as they're feeding themselves along the ocean, their tiny little legs running up to just the little edge of that wave where the foam comes on shore. Every little detail is in that teeny tiny little postage stamp of a picture. So I wanted to share that with you today because when I wrote that in my newsletter last week, so many of you wrote back to me and told me that that was really helpful to you, that that postage stamp idea was something you had never heard before. And being able to tuck that just somewhere in the closest memory, that closest spot in your brain where you can retrieve that at a moment's notice, that is super helpful to me when I need to go in my mind and de-stress. So you can do this while you are on an airplane. You can close your eyes and bring up that image and just let that whole image expand and just engulf your whole body in that whole body experience of being at the beach. feeling that sun on your hair, how it warms my hair, feeling that sun on my shoulders, the smell of the suntan lotion. I don't like those coconut suntan lotions, but the smell of my suntan lotion always brings me back to that place. The sound of the gulls always brings me back to that place. So try to think about all of your senses when you are getting into that happy place. Now, as I said, when I am creating a quilt picture, I want to get some more detail into that little postage stamp, but I'm going to blow it up into a quilt. So I've decided to do a series called Under the Sea. And as we create these little critters and objects that you might find under the sea, we're going to start to build up on our background fabric and create an under the sea picture. So as I was thinking about that over the past few days, this morning I went to Google. And I said, look, let's search for some under the sea images so that we can be inspired for our under the sea quilt. And what I love to do, because I want simple images that can easily be made with applique, what I love to do is look at kids' coloring pages. Now, a lot of the times the kids' coloring pages can be a little bit juvenile, and I'm going to show you a picture. Let's see if I can do this. I'm going to share my screen with you, and I'm going to share my Google search. That is the fish coloring pages, okay? So here we are. We've got fish coloring pages, and they can be a little bit juvenile sometimes. You know, that cute little fish with a smile on his face. It looks a little bit like rainbow fish. But I love that picture because it inspires me with all of those rounded shapes. Those are all shapes that we can cut with our Leaves Galore or our Hearts and More tools, right? So if you want to do a quilt for a child, this is definitely some good inspiration. But then start to look at some of those other pictures, right? They're not juvenile. There's some really beautiful pictures there that are a little bit more sophisticated. There's also a beautiful picture here of all different types of critters that you might find under the sea. And they're a little bit cartoony, but at the same time, look at that shrimp up here, and look at this cute little whale. This blowfish just makes me smile. So all of these little critters could be found in an under the sea quilt. Well, you may remember that about a year or so ago, I made a little crab guy, which I just love. And then when I went to Schoodic up in Maine, and I was up in Maine this weekend. So when I was up in Maine, I was looking at some, I had some lobster while I was up there. And so I was looking for some, you know, it stopped sharing. Hold on. Let me see if I could do that again. Let me see. Present and share my screen. Let's see if I can do this again. Nope, it's not going to do it. Look at that. Nope. That's interesting. Okay, so I was up in Maine and I saw some... I had some lobster, and I remembered that about a year ago, I made a lobster in our sewing in slippers session. So I'm going to go ahead and go find the lobster. I'm going to go find the crab, but I think it's time we add some more things to our critter series so that we can keep adding to a quilt. And what I love about doing an under the sea scene is we're going to really enjoy all of those grasses, all of those things that are going to flow under the water. Let me stop that share now. So So we're going to enjoy doing all these undulating grasses. We're going to enjoy doing all of these wavy shapes, maybe some big brain coral shapes. We're going to have some fun with this. And today I just want to play. I just want to experiment and see what we can come up with for our under the sea scene. So I did print out a little picture, and one of the pictures had kind of some caves or some coral on the side, and it almost made like a little fishbowl in the middle, and I thought that that would give us some really interesting texture. So I started pulling fabrics from my stash, and I came up with a whole bunch of fabrics that looked like they were under the sea. They were some beautiful, beautiful dark blue colors. So I started pulling these out, and what I realized is I don't think I have anything large enough for that background. I have some really gorgeous fabrics here. This one I absolutely love. Isn't this stunning? But I don't have a piece that's big enough for our background. So one thing that I'm going to be doing is, as I am shopping over the next month or so, I'm going to be looking for the appropriate background for my quilt. But you know, maybe we're just going to start with a very plain background. We could even start with a black piece of fabric. This one was from my class where we did walking foot quilting. So we were marking walking foot quilting with the waves. But I thought that those lines that I quilted would be beautiful for an under the sea scene. We could even start with that and then start to add all of our grasses and things on top. So I'm just going to put this down, or actually I'll put it back here on the wall as just a little design board, right? So that's just going to be my design board. I probably will not end up using a black fabric for the background, but I want to play with it because I want something that the grasses and all of that the fish and all of that scene is going to really stand out on. And when you get down at the bottom of the ocean, I betcha it's pretty black under there. But of course, we want our design elements to really pop out. So if I do some sort of a cave, maybe made out of coral, I might put some browns in there, some sandy colors, and have the back of the cave with maybe one of these very, very dark blue colors on the inside. So I'm thinking that I'm going to maybe bring in some background there. But what I really want to focus on today is, can we make a simple fish, and can we make a school of fish, and how about those wavy undulating seagrasses? So let's start there. Let's start with the seagrass because that's going to be really fun to create. And then maybe we'll add a school of small fish, because those will be super, super simple to make. And then over the next few weeks or months, we can add some other design elements to our piece. Now, I was trying to share this picture. And let me see if I can try one more time for that screen share. You know, it's just not sharing the right, okay, it's not sharing the right screen. But I do have a beautiful picture that has lots of different shells, fish. It has kind of that cave look, and it has some coral, it has a crab, and it has all different types of fish. So I've got that up on my screen to use as my inspiration. Where are you going to find your inspiration piece? You can search online. You can watch television. You can look at documentaries of under the sea. But my favorite place is in Google Images. Just type under the sea, and you'll come up with hundreds of Google images where you can search for the perfect under the sea photo to use as your inspiration. Now, I will warn you that when you do a Google search on under the sea, you may come up with things that are copyright, right? Because if it's a photograph, for example, or it comes from a video, or it's a coloring page, those may have a copyright. So don't, we're not going to be recreating someone else's drawing. We're not going to recreate someone else's quilt. We're not even going to recreate somebody else's photograph. But I'm using those Google images as inspiration. What types of shapes are we looking for? So I'm going to look for waving grasses, maybe some branching coral, maybe some under the sea plants that have big roundish leaves that I can easily create with my tools, and any other fish, coral, shells, anything else you can come up with from different pictures, we're going to bring all together into one creation. So I'm going to invite you to come along with me and create something with me. So let's get started down on my workstation. So I'm going to change my camera. I guess that's different here. It's in settings. I'm going to change my camera so that you can see my overhead camera. Sorry, I must have bonked it with my head. And I've got my ironing board right here, just a little tiny one, so that I can just start to put together some fish, etc. Oh, and here's a little tiny printout of that under the sea scene. It didn't come out great because it's just a tiny little thumbnail. It's basically a little postage stamp on the computer that I've expanded. And it makes it all pixelated. Well, that's okay because I'm just using these basic shapes as inspiration. I don't need the detail. I'm just looking to be inspired by the shapes. I also printed out this coloring page, which wasn't as cartoony as some of the others, and I really loved these little clamshell scales on this fish. If I were doing something large scale, I would be able to use my little 1-inch tool to make clamshells on this fish if I were making something this size or larger. But I'm not going to use a fish that's this big, so what I'd probably do is look for a fabric that has that type of a clamshell pattern. Then when I look at all the other design elements, well, this is just a triangle, right? But it has rounded sides. So we can certainly do a triangle with rounded sides. We have this cute little shape up here, which may just be the top of our Hearts and More tool. We can play around with that. And we've got this shape here, which would be just like a little leaf shape with a rounded end. So all of these shapes I know I can cut out with my tools. So if I want to do a large fish like this, I could certainly play with that with my tools. Or if I want to do a whole scene and make those fish much smaller, I need to start off with those, the grasses and the vegetation for the background before I start to weave in these fish. So let's get started with cutting some of that vegetation. We want to grab our straight cutting mat because I'm going to start by working with the Leaves Galore tools. Now the Leaves Galore tools do come in 3 different sizes. But for the small project that I want to work on, I'm primarily going to use that 2.5-inch curve on the petite tool, and I'll also use the opposite side, that 5-inch curve on the petite tool. So let's get started with that. Well, the first thing I want to do is find fabrics that have that underwater feel. So I went into my fused fabric bin. You can see leftover pieces from other projects. And I'm pulling out fabrics that have that underwater feel to them. some greens, some blues. This one even has some, looks like a kelp design right on there, which is kind of cool. Just some plain old greens and blues, anything that I think I would see under the sea. So let me grab a few of those fabrics and let's start to play. I've got a few more here. Oh, I've even found this beautiful fabric from So Batik, and it started with a very dark turquoise blue and it goes to a very light turquoise blue. Well, I only have 1/3 of a yard of this, but this would make a gorgeous background for my quilt, because as the ocean gets deeper, it's going to get darker and darker. So when I said I was going to go out shopping for some fabric for this project, I may just go right to the So Batik website and pick up some more of these nuanced gradations, which would be a beautiful background for this quilt. But while I'm thinking about what background I might want to use, I'm finding any fabrics in my stash, and I might have used them before for another project. Anything in my stash that looks to me like a grass that you would find under the water. Now, when my fabric already has fusible on it, and I want to just straighten that out and make sure it's ready for using, this one's all wrinkled because it's been in my stash, I'm going to pick off any lint on the back there, and then I'm going to just go ahead and give this a quick old press with my iron on my applique pressing sheet. So this isn't just any board here that I'm using. It's not just a pressing board. This is covered with an applique pressing sheet. Now if you want to make one of those, you can go right to the Misty Fuse website, and she gives you instructions on how to make that. I've also got a link to that in our membership site, so that any of our members want to go grab their instructions for making that board. It's in the membership site. So I'm going to come over here on the side of the fabric that's not cut yet, because I'm looking at this edge, which I could use, but that was cut with the 8-inch tool. Let's just line that up again and show you that that one was cut with the 8-inch tool. I'm going to grab a bigger mat because that fabric is just a little bit too long for this small mat. Let's grab a bigger mat and let's line up that 8-inch tool with what was already cut here, because maybe I can use a big 8-inch curve to make some of these grasses. So let's go ahead and get started, and then we'll see if it's too big. If it's too big, then we'll go down to that 5-inch curve and do the same thing. So I've just evened up that edge because it was old and ratty. It's been hanging around my sewing room. It's all frayed. So I just evened up that edge of my fused fabric. And now I'm just going to come down very, very, very slightly with that curve. And I'm going to make a nice, graceful S-shaped curve. Well, you know what? That's kind of cool. I didn't need to use the 5-inch curve, did I? That little tiny curve with the 8-inch curve is really pretty. And look at this one. If I just slide that tool up ever so slightly, so I was here first, and now I'm going up here ever so slightly. Well, first of all, let me cut this again, because that didn't get cut all the way up. Let me try that again. Let's straighten out this edge. So now I've got that 8-inch curve all the way up. All right. Okay, now that I've got the 8-inch curve all the way up, I'm going to pull down ever so slightly or go up. I think I'm going to go up this time, because what I'm trying to do is have a curve that starts off thick and then goes very, very thin and then goes up and goes thick again. So I thought that that would be fun. Now I might want to cut this in half and use one piece this way and one piece this way. So I'm kind of creating some grass to go on the bottom of my seascape. Now I thought I was going to want to use the 5-inch curve to do this. And if I did use the 5-inch curve, it would be absolutely beautiful. But I really like these long, thin shapes that I'm getting with that 8-inch curve. They really look like the waves are taking that grass and just moving it in the ocean. So I love these grass shapes that I've got going on here. So I'm just going to cut a couple more from this fabric. Okay, I really want my curve to change the other direction. And I think what I'm going to need to do is keep going up, 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 up like this. And then this one goes in the opposite direction when I lay it out this way. If I keep going up, if I keep pushing my tool up every time, let's see what happens. I really want those, see how the grasses are going to the right? It's like an S curve. This one is more like a Z curve. I want more Z curves, so I'm going to turn it over and see if I can cut some Z curves. So from my first cut, I'm going to go down into the left again. That's not going to do it, so let me go up. Now, that looks like a Z curve, but I'm going to turn that over. It's going to end up being an S curve. So I don't have room. It's just where this, this curve is placed on the fabric. I don't have room to make that Z if I do it upside down. I'm getting another S if I do it this way. So it seems like I'm just going to get S-shaped curves because of where this curve is falling on the fabric. In order to get a Z-shaped curve, I'm going to need to move this tool down to get more Z-shaped curves. So I think what I'll probably do instead is I'll wait and I'll grab a different fabric to make some Z-shaped curves. But I don't want to give up on this fabric, so I'm going to go ahead and use that 5-inch curve right here because I want a little bit more variety to my shapes. These are all pretty standard, and so I'm going to cut this way with the 5-inch curve, and that's going to give me a little bit more variety. Let me go ahead and continue cutting all the way up to the end. Now, when I slide up or I slide down, I'm going to get a little bit different shapes going on right here. So if I do it this way, let's see, there's a Z shape right there. So I'm going to cut this one, and I'm going to get this little Z shape right here and there. That looks really pretty. I like that shape. And I like that it gets thin and then it gets thick again up here. So that could be the bottom. I think this would be the bottom here because that looks like it's planted on the ground. And then it goes up and it turns into that beautiful swoopy shape up there. So I really like that one. Let's continue on with a few more of that 5-inch curve. So this one starts like an S, but I'm going to let it continue. And we're going to get a little Z shape out of this right here at the top. So you can play with the tools. You can play with all of these shapes and get some really fun shapes happening for your seascape background. Now I want to move these over and add in this one right here. I'm going to connect these two. So it goes really thin and then it kind of continues up and waves even further. Isn't that pretty? I really like this wave right here. So I think this is a great start for our seagrasses. So I'm going to push those aside, and then I want to make some other types of vegetation for under the sea. So I certainly need a different color, and maybe I'm going to go with just this darker green. You know, it's too similar. That's not going to show up well at all, having it so similar. I've got this lighter green, that's kind of cute, but I also had that green that had some brown in it. And I really think I need something with a lot of contrast. But you know, That's not going well either. Why don't we look at using some really, really bright green, or maybe that would be better as a fish or a piece of coral. So I think this one is the one I'm gonna go with. Some lighter green here. It still has the same shades, it's just quite a bit lighter. In fact, it even could possibly, no, it's not a So Batik. This one's not a So Batik, but it almost looks like it could have come from the same piece on a gradation fabric, but it's not. This is from a different fabric. So I'm just gonna iron out any wrinkles that I have. And look, I've already got a 2.5 inch curve. Nope, that's a 3-inch curve. So I'm gonna go to the 3-inch curve. Yep, there we go. I'm gonna go to the 3-inch curve, and I think what I'd like to have is some wavy stems, and off of those wavy stems, we are going to put some kelp, maybe some thicker lemon-shaped leaves, or even some standard leaves, or even some S and Z-shaped curves. So let's get a little bit of stems going on here. I'm going to cut a couple of times to make a few little stems. And of course, these don't need to be full-length stems. So I'm probably just going to cut that in half and have them coming up from the bottom, some nice short stem lengths, maybe some that are a little bit longer. Make sure that your shiny side is down. And there we go. We've got some stems, and we can start adding some of our thicker kelp or some of our grasses. So there we go. We've got kind of a little shape going on here. I'm not sure I like it because it's very consistent. I think we're going to just add some little side shoots off of our stems like this and make it look a little bit more like it's waving under the sea. Okay, so we've got this one, and then we're going to have a little side shoot over here. All right, good. That's a great start. Now, it might be very light on your screen. Let me bring that up. I don't have, yeah, there we go. Yeah, the color contrast on this light mat is not very good. So I think what I'll probably do is just use that exact same fabric and cut some little 2.5-inch leaves. So let's see how we can do that. I only have this one little piece of fabric left, so I really want to use it wisely. So I'm just going to fold it in half here, and I'm going to kind of fussy cut some little 2.5-inch leaves. And maybe they don't even need to be 2.5 inches. In fact, I'm going to use the second dash line on the tool to make these little leaves even smaller than the 2.5-inch leaves. And all we're going to do is add all these little leaves to the ends of our stems to make a nice little piece of seagrass. Now, because I don't have my background yet, I'm just going to be stockpiling these shapes. So the best thing that I can do is to design the little shape here on my board. I could even fuse this all down on my pressing mat so that it all ends up being one piece that I can then apply to whatever background that I find. But I think I'm just going to keep everything independent right now, so that when I have my fish, when I have my little lobsters and my little crabs, I'll be able to move these grasses in and around the little critters. So this is going to be a critter quilt. I'm going to have lots of little critters on this quilt. So I'm not going to fuse this all together. I'm going to leave it loose. That way my little critters can go in and around all these little grasses. So you can see what I'm doing is just cutting 2 leaves at a time. I make my first little curve with the template, and then I turn that curve around so I can put that curve on the second dashed line. So the biggest dashed line is a 2.5-inch leaf. I'm using the dashed line right next to that line to make a smaller leaf. And then I'm just going to add lots and lots of these little leaves to that kelp plant, or to that plant that's under the sea. So as I go, I'm just cutting 2 leaves at a time. It's not as efficient as cutting those leaves in a continuous manner like I normally do, cutting up to 12 leaves at a time. But when you're playing, when you want that little shape but you want to customize it and make it exactly the size you want, you can cut them 1, 2, 4, or 5 at a time, depending on how many layers of fabric you're cutting at once. So I don't want to get too heavy with the leaves because I want my little fish to be able to swim in and out of this shape here. But I find it's a little top heavy, so I'm going to put another stem over here. Which way do I want my stem to curve? Probably as an S, right? Right there. I'd probably like to have an S shape. So let's go ahead and make another little piece of grass here with a little S shape. Just like that. Okay. And then I can add a few more little leaves. Now that's a little thicker than these stems, so I could go narrow that down, but you know, it's really not bad. So I'm just going to leave it as is for now. Let's add another leaf or 2 right over here on this little stem, and then I think that that composition looks pretty good, having not too many leaves, but just enough so that my fish can hide in and around. Now I'm going for a little darker section of the green, so I can make a little darker leaf right here. When you have these beautiful batiks, you can kind of fussy cut the colors to give you a little bit more depth if you need a darker leaf here or there. So yeah, that looks great. I think that's a wonderful start to my little under the sea kelp plant. So I'm going to grab a Ziploc bag, and I'm going to just grab all these little design elements, but I want to remember how they were laid out. So I'm going to grab my telephone here. I'm going to open that up. Let's see if it'll see my face. Good. And then I'm going to grab my camera. I'm going to take a picture of that little design element, because even though I was just kind of throwing it down there, I like the way that it ended up. So I can use that now as a reference when I go to lay it out on my quilts. So in the meantime, I'm just going to scoop it up on my piece of paper here. I'm going to keep all of these design elements together, and I will slide, I'm going to make all those flat. I'm going to slide this piece of paper right into a plastic sleeve. And in that plastic sleeve, I've got 3-hole punch, and so I can put this in my notebook. And this one I could label, this is going to be the kelp in the picture. I can keep these also nice and flat, and I can put those in another sleeve and keep these handy until I'm ready to make that background. Now, I definitely would like some fish in this picture, and I'm not sure how many fish I'm going to make, but I know that I can do a school of fish really, really simply by just taking some leaf shapes that I've already cut. I was doing a demonstration the other day, and I had all of these little leaf shapes cut. So I'm just going to use all those little leaf shapes, and then we'll need some little tails for our fish. So let me grab the scraps of those fabrics that I was cutting just a day or 2 ago. I'm going to grab some of those scraps, and we need to make little tail fins for our fish. So, oh, these scraps aren't fused, so I'll have to fuse those pieces. But this little scrap right here is fused. when you are cutting out your basic leaf shape, they are cut one after the other on your fabric. And oftentimes you end up with a little leaf shape that is a partial shape. Normally what happens on your fabric, because you've got straight edges, is you end up with a shape like this and a shape like this at the end of every row of leaves. Well, you can see how easily we can use those little bits and pieces to be the tail end of our fish. So there's two ways we can do this. We can make it super duper simple, and we can just cut this as a blunt end with a straight line. So let me do that. So we'll have little fish with little straight tails, and they're absolutely adorable. But I think I'd like to have a fish with a curvy little tail. So let's go ahead and play around with making a curvy little tail. So basically, what we want is two little leaves that are going to come together at this point. So let's play with that idea and see if we can make that happen. Well, I could certainly make that happen with the 2.5-inch leaf shape. And let's do that first. Because we've got the 2.5-inch leaf shape already, we might as well match it with the 2.5-inch leaf shape on this end. So there we go. Super cute, right? Might be a little bit long. Maybe I want that to be a little bit shorter. If we want it a little shorter, we're going to do the same thing with a shorter triangle. So this triangle was a little bit longer. This one's quite a bit shorter. Let's go ahead and do that same technique with the shorter piece. So this is the leftovers from your leaves. I'm just going to fold it in half, and I'm going to use that curve to make it into a little tail fin kind of shape. I'm just going to cut that little bit of a curve so that the little tail fin has a sweet little shape to it. And I like that so much better than the big one. I think that's just adorable. So all we need to do to adjust this one is to shorten it a little bit. So I'm going to take that curve and just adjust the angle of the curve so I shorten his tail and make it a little closer to this one. So there you have it. We've got an adorable little tail for this guy and for this one. Now we need to find those other fabrics and make little tails for our other little fish here. That's going to make a sweet little school of fish. Now, because they are the same color as, they're close to the same color as my grasses, I think that they are going to be hiding in and among the grasses. They're camouflaged like real fish would be, and I think that will be sweet hiding in this grass. So I'll need to fuse these other fabrics, make some other little tails for my guys, find the other fabrics for these, and make this into a little school of fish. So that idea is underway. I'm going to put those aside. I know that I can make an easy little school of fish. But maybe I want to make a fish that looks a little bit like this one. Do you see how his tail is curved up? He's got two little tail fins here. He's got maybe a little something on the top, a little something over on that side, and kind of this heart-shaped face. So I think we're going to play with that idea next. And I want a fish that's going to be a little bit brighter. So let me look through my fabric stash here and find out what other fish colors I could have. Maybe I'm going to have a little pinky purple fish in my, actually, you know what, I really like this to be a coral or a shell because of that design in the fabric. So let's not use that one. Let's find something else that we can use for another little fish. So I've got this pretty pink or purple here. And let's see, I could use another little piece of pink. That would be kind of cute for his face. So let's start with these two and see what we can do. So I want this fish to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to start with the swoop of his belly, and I'm going to use the 5-inch curve for that. So let me just use that 5-inch curve and make a little swoop for his belly. And then I'm going to come up at an angle like this. So let's see, I'm going to go this way. So there's his belly right there. And then I'm going to swoop it down kind of like this. So I can see through the tool. I just want it to be big enough here so that I can add the front of his little face here. All right, so I've just swooped it out with the inside of the curve here. I've moved the curve here and swooped that out with the inside of the curve. And now I get to play with his little tail feathers, his little tail fins. And I think for his tail fins, we're probably just gonna use this pink fabric, and I'm gonna make 2 little 2.5-inch leaves that are tucked in together. So let's see, maybe at a 45-degree angle like this, but I'm not gonna cut all the way down to the point of that leaf. I'm gonna make sure they're still connected right here by going off of the fabric at that tip. Now this might take me a couple of tries to make sure that these tail fins are the way I want them, connected at the bottom and having a nice little angle out in both directions. So actually that's kind of cute. That's not bad. That's not bad. Let's make another little tail fin for him. I'm sorry, another little fin over here on the side. I'm going to use a regular 2.5-inch leaf for his little side fin here. Now if I had big pieces of fabric, I probably just would have cut 2.5-inch leaves in a whole line, but I'm trying to use up all these little scraps. So I'm going to make another little piece of a 2.5-inch leaf from this scrap. It doesn't have to cover the whole 2.5-inch leaf, but I just want that same shape for the little fin that comes out from underneath right here. Oh, did that cut? Pretty good. Let me cut that again. Okay, so I just want another little fin coming out from down this way, like this. And then I need to make a little head on my fish. Well, I wish I had another fabric to use. You know, maybe I'm going to need to use that fabric. I think so. That's okay. So I'm going to grab a little piece of this fabric, and I'm going to kind of make a little oval shape. Now I made this shape the other day when I was making a strawberry. So I need to find a circle that's the right size to cover up the end of this fishy right here. So that circle's not a bad size. That's 2.5, but I think maybe the 3 would be a little bit better to make the head on my fish. So I'm going to start with the 3-inch. Oh, and I need a little tail fin back here too, don't I? What is that called? Dorsal fin? So I need that pink again. If there's any little bits and pieces of that pink left, I'm not sure I have that same pink, but maybe I can use this one instead. I need to make his little dorsal fin for the back. So I think the dorsal fin is just basically going to be a rectangle, right? I'm going to make this little rectangle, and I'm just going to taper it down a little bit, like that. Okay, so maybe about this long. Maybe like that. And then I think what I need to do is just curve those ends. So I'm looking for my tiniest little Leaves Galore tool. My teeny tiny Leaves Galore tool, which I can't find right now. But that's okay. We'll use this next size one. And we're just going to round the top part of that dorsal fin. And then we'll round the little tail end of the dorsal fin. Okay. Now what I'm always thinking about is, where can I add more texture? Well, I can certainly add more texture when I go to quilt this little guy. I'm going to be able to go up and down with my stitching and create some texture on that little dorsal fin. Now, I'm not sure I like the shape of that one. It's not my favorite, so I might just go in and just scoop it out a little bit using just a little bit of hand cutting. There, that's better. I like that shape just a little bit more. So let's make a head for our little fish. Looking for another color of pink, but I'm going to just stick with this one since I have it in my hand. And I'm going to cut a rectangle. And I want that rectangle to be about 3 by 4. So let me just grab my actual ruler. Let's see if I can make this piece into about 3 by 3.5. I think that'll be long enough. 3 by 3.5 I think sounds like a good size. And I'm not sure that I'm going to love this color. In fact, I'm going to use this end that's a little bit more pink and cut it here at 3.5. Okay, so you are truly experimenting with me. I've never made a fish like this before. I'm just kind of going by this little shape right here. And the shape on the paper looks to me like a strawberry. Well, I just made strawberries the other day for my cornucopia block. And what I did was I folded that fabric and cut one end with the circle. So let's cut this end with that 3-inch circle. Okay, because I cut the fabric 3 inches, if I line up right on that arrow line on my tool, I can cut the top of a 3-inch circle right here. Okay, so that's this part. And then I want to taper this down to a little bit of a point to make the front of his face. So that end looks good. This end I want pointy. So I'm actually going to use a bigger curve and connect the end of that 3-inch curve with a bigger curve. So I'm going to go for the 5-inch curve, and I'm just going to connect this edge of the fabric to this edge of the fabric and see if it's pointy enough. If it's not pointy enough, then I need a more gradual curve to come down to a point. But let's check this out and see. Oh, that's not bad. Now it's a little bit larger than I think he should be. I think that's just a little bit too big on the front of my fish. So I think I'm going to pull this down and use the 5-inch curve to narrow down that fish's face. Let's just bring it down a little bit. I'm just taking a little sliver off, maybe 1/2 inch here, 1/4 inch, but it's folded, so it's 2. And let's do that. Let's see. Not bad, not bad. Okay, so there is a sweet little fish. I can picture having a nice little black eye right there, and I can turn this up to make him looking up. I can turn it down to make it look like he's looking down. I can play around with his face to give it the look that I'm going for. Now right here, it looks like he's got a little bottom lip right there, and it would be really fun to give this fish some personality. So I can use my regular old scissors, and after I cut that little fishy face, maybe I'm going to go in and make a little bottom lip and a little top lip right there. And then I've got some real personality to my fish, even though everything was all rotary cut. Now I gave it a little personality on the top here as well. I did a little fussy cutting with my rotary cutter, but there we go. We've got this sweet little fish now, and he doesn't really look like a cartoon fish at all, does he? He looks like he's a little bit more realistic, a little bit more sophisticated than those little cartoony fish. So these little tiny details, okay, the little fish lips right here, the little tiny detail where I've swooped down the back of his dorsal fin. All of those little tiny details will go a long way to giving your rotary cut designs a little bit more pizzazz and a little bit more personality. Now you can imagine when I start adding these grasses and all the other little critters down here around my fish, that this is really going to start to take shape. So I tell you what, let's go ahead and use our pressing mat, and let's put the little tails on our tiny little school of fish. I wish I had more fabric to get more of those tails done. I'm going to have to go digging through my fabric to get some more tails done. Actually, I tell you what, this one has a little scoop out of the side here, so I'm going to cut it in half. And then I'm going to make the little tail for this little guy. So let's go ahead and fold that one again. Do you remember how I did it? I took the 2.5 inch curve and I scooped this out at an angle so that it made the little tail fin for our fish. So let's go ahead and make this little tail fin for this fish. And then I won't have a big school of fish, but at least I have several different little fish here. I'll make this one too. I'll cut this one in half, and then I'll fold it in half and make a little tail fin for this fish. So it's been really fun here to just play with this under the sea idea. If you are creative and you can see this happening, you can see yourself putting together a nice little under the sea scene. This is that little snapshot that could be your happy place, or this inspired me to make this little sea scene because the ocean is definitely my happy place. All right, we're going to need a couple little more fish and tails up there, but I would like to get this guy all secure. So let's bring him over to the pressing sheet. Okay, where you have underlapping, we're going to make sure that it just underlaps. So I'm just going to press the edge like this. Then I'm going to lift it up and see if I can remove any excess bulk. Same with his face. Now, which direction am I going to go? I think I'm going to go upwards this way, so it looks like he's looking up. I'm going to press just this little edge right here. I'm going to just tack this edge, and then I'm going to go in and get rid of any excess fabric that is underneath. Okay, that helps to reduce the bulk on your little applique projects. Then we're going to put his little fin this way, another fin this way, and then his tail fins like this. I like it. I think it's good. I'm just going to go ahead and press those elements on. And now between my my fancy fish and my little school of simple fish, it looks like I'm ready to start designing on my background fabric. So let's go ahead and grab that dark blue fabric. I'm not sure this is the one that I'm going to end up using, so I'm not going to fuse anything on just yet because I don't think there's going to be enough contrast between all of these green design elements and the background fabric. So let's just play with that and see what we think. Not so sure that's enough contrast, but that's okay. We can play with it anyway. I won't fuse anything down just yet because I've got a lot more ideas in my head and a lot more designing to do. I just wanted to play and see what that's going to look like on that dark color fabric. Now, of course, my grasses can cross each other. They can go over the other type of kelp grass that I had made. There's going to be a lot of different interplay between all these different design elements. So there we go. We're just going to cross some over, and there we are. So we're just going to have some fun with this. Don't really worry too much about this design, because the focal point is going to be all of those beautiful, beautiful fish. All right, so we're just going to play with that design. I'll probably do a whole lot more playing with that. We're going to add in our little fish here. And then this little school of fish on this background, they are almost going to disappear. But what I meant by playing with these is having them swim in and under those little pieces of your grasses. He's going to hide his little tail behind this piece, like this. Okay, and he's going to be coming out from on top of that piece. So there you go. We've got all of these sweet little fish that are schooling behind the grasses. So super sweet, super easy. This is just the beginning of a much larger project. So I'm going to be looking for a background fabric that'll hold its own against all of these other colors, but that's not too bright. We want something that's going to recede into the background and then start playing with all of these other design elements. Kind of like this color, so I think I'm going to be looking for something in this color range where my bright little fish are going to shine right on top of that fabric. Now, speaking of shining, I've got some really, really pretty iridescent fabrics that I can use. So when I want to make my fish have a little bit of glimmer, a little bit of personality, I can certainly use some of these iridescent fabrics. And what about adding a little bit of iridescent paint to my more plain color fish? I could use a little bit of iridescent paint here and make some little scale shapes with a little paintbrush, and I can add a whole lot more personality to that fish. I can use a bead or a dot of black fabric, or even a dot of black paint to make a little eye for that fish. Let's go ahead and use some black fabric that is already fused. And just for fun, I'm going to take that black fused fabric and I'm going to start with a bigger circle. I don't know how big his eyes should be, so I'm going to start with a fairly big circle. Oh, you know what? That's not bad. That's not a bad size eye for that guy. If I wanted to, I could start with a really big circle. Now, what I probably want to do is just take a little hint of white paint and make a little sparkle in his eye and give him a little bit of personality. Now, I think that's definitely too big. I like this one better. But what I wanted to illustrate is, once you have a basic circle, you can just keep rotating that circle and taking off a little sliver at a time until you get the size eye you want for your fish. That's not a bad size right there. Or let's go even a little bit smaller. So take that circle and just start cutting in and just rotate as you cut. I'm holding my scissors still. I'm rotating that little circle as I cut. When it gets even too small to hold it with your fingers, you can use those reverse action tweezers to hold on to that tiny little circle and cut off these little bits and pieces from your circle. So let me go grab my reverse action tweezers so you can see exactly what I mean by that. I'm going to grab that eye with my little reverse action tweezers, and then I'm going to be able to trim that eye down to whatever size I need. And I'm just going to keep rotating it in those tweezers in order to keep that a nice rounded shape. Yeah, it gets so tiny there, but if I just hold it on the edge with those tweezers, I'm going to be able to make that circle any size I want it to be. So take your time, keep your scissors straight, rotate your hand around, and you're going to be able to make teeny tiny, adorable little eyes for your fish in a very simple way, because that is just a fusible little dot right there. It already has the fusible on the back. I like this one a little bit bigger. I think I like a little bit bigger eye. And then I would take a piece of pure white. I don't have white fused right here, but I do have a little bit of this very light yellow. It's almost white, so let's see if that's going to work. And I just want a little speck for a little glimmer in his eye, just the tiniest little dot of that white. And I'm gonna need my scissors again, my tweezers again, and let's just add a tiny little dot of white into his eyeball and see if we can give him a little bit more personality that way. Okay, good. All right, the tweezers sometimes make it easier to place that little guy, and there you go. There we go. So we've given our fish a little bit of personality by adding his eye, adding a little bit of a white glimmer into his eye. It's not quite the right shape yet. I would play around with that just a little bit more with my tweezers, with my scissors, and get that just a nice little rounded shape. Yeah, oh, I like that better. Okay, good. And now I've got a fish with some personality. I've got something that's all fused and ready to go. Of course, those tiny little details I could have done with thread in thread painting. And I'm going to have a lot of fun creating the little scales on his, the main part of the fish here, with my quilting designs. I'm going to get up in here and do his tail fins with a beautiful little quilting design. I'll probably even add some lines into his fins right here, and that's going to give that fish a whole lot of a little spark and a little realism in my little guy. All right, let me come back to you. I'm way over time. So let me just change my camera. So sorry. I get so carried away, don't I? When I'm making something like this, I really get carried away. I have so much fun playing with these ideas, and I hope that you had fun playing too. Now, on another day, we'll keep adding to our Under the Sea creation. So I will add this little fish to our critter series, and we'll have a new critter series called Under the Sea. I'm going to grab that lobster and that crab that I did before. We're going to make some shells. We'll make some under the sea creatures like a probably an octopus, maybe a jellyfish or things like that we can continue to add to this under the sea picture. Well, if you need a little bit of de-stressing, take out that little postage stamp in your mind and go to the ocean with me. And I hope that you enjoyed creating our little tiny under the sea scene that we can shrink down into that little postage stamp and go to it anytime you need a little de-stressing. Well, I've had so much fun playing around with fusible applique with all of you. If you like what I do here, you will love the Ahead of the Curve membership, where we make specific patterns using rotary cut applique techniques. It's not quite so loose and designy as this. We actually have patterns that we are completing in a fraction of the time of traditional applique methods. So if you think you'd like to get into some of those workshops, you can come join us at Ahead of the Curve. And I'm going to sign off now. I'm going to put all of these ideas in my binder, in those plastic protector sheets so that I can pull it out the next time we get together. Now, next time on Sewing in Slippers with Sue, we're going to talk to Bev Henyon, who does the retreat up at the Schoodic Peninsula in Maine. So Bev Henyon will be my guest next week on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. Until then, happy applique, have a great week, and always, always go to your happy place. Talk to you all again soon.